You referenced there a couple of minutes ago the idea that people who would do a job like yours don't necessarily have a gig if there's no people around. And one of the things that jumps out to me when you say that is that, I don't know whether it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a few weeks ago, you put out the chapter list of the book. So I'm not giving any spoilers here. It was just sort of here's a teaser, here's what's coming. Is it weird to you that I am oddly fascinated by that period of Blue Jays baseball where there were no fans around, where there wasn't, that... Yeah. We've talked a lot about the 15-16 Jays. We've talked about the 92-93 Jays. This is an angle, I'm intrigued to hear what it was actually like. They went and had their little training camp at the Dome, but they all had to stay at the hotel. It was all isolated, and then it was down to play in Florida, and then it was in Buffalo for a little while. This is something that hasn't been, in my, that I'm aware of. This is not something that's been approached and really dug into, whether it be what the guys were going through, how it might have impacted the team. It's odd to me that such a negative part of our world has my attention so much as I look forward to reading this. There's something about the COVID years that I'm intrigued to read about, man.
Yeah, that might have been the most interesting chapter for me to write, because I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like 2020 and 2021 me was like a person I was writing about instead of it being something I actually experienced. Sure. It was so strange a lot of this was going back through old audio, old videos, going back through my phone of old pictures I had from those times. And for a lot of that stretch, I was one of, sometimes the only Blue Jays reporter in the U.S. covering them.
Right, yeah.
And I'll admit that some of that comes from the fact I work for a U.S. company at MLB.com. Sure. So our American writers were traveling to do theirs, and our folks were very good with me, making sure I was comfortable and healthy and taken care of. But they were like, "So, do you want to?" And I said, "Yes, get me out of here, my God." So I, either by luck or by law, I don't know, I got over the border.
Sure.
And it's that time in Dunedin, that spring training in 2021, I remember, empty ballparks, empty games. Some of them didn't have broadcasts.
Yeah.
And I put this line in the book, there are Vladdy home run videos that the only copy of it in the world is on my iPhone. That's in a drawer somewhere.
That's wild.
Which
man.
feels like take the iPhone out of it feels like a sentence from the 40s or something, right? But those Buffalo times as well, I still remember getting down to Buffalo for the first time for when they were going to start playing there. And I stayed at the Marriott right next to the stadium, the Lecom Center in Buffalo. And I'll never forget checking into that hotel. And I said, well, I didn't know how long I was going to be there. I had no I just brought all my clothes. And I said, okay, I'll go out for a walk and I'll just at least find some beer to bring back to the room.
Sure.
And I walked and Jesus, you'd go to a gas station that we boarded up. I would Google a corner store, you'd get there,
Wow.
It's just a real jarring.
Yeah.
God bless Buffalo. I am happy to not visit, but it's just a really amazing thing to look back on. I wrote a bit about the first game there in Buffalo and just how strange it was to be around people again, because the United States, generally speaking, opened up their guidelines a little looser and a little quicker than Ontario. So it really felt like I was breaking the rules. And I also had to be extremely careful because Lord knows I wanted to go into a bar and drink 20 beer and just finally be around people.
Yeah.
But if I was the guy that screwed up the Blue Jays,
Sure.
I'm not getting back into Canada.
Probably not.
If idiot reporter spreads COVID to Blue Jays, that would have really helped my career. So there was a lot of that as well. Just the amount of testing I had to go. Jesus, the testing I had to go through to cover those years. But then bringing it back to the happier point. I mean, for the rest of my life, I will remember 2 baseball games, which is the first game in Buffalo. And I write a bit about it in the book. My favorite play of all time. It was a pop fly, Jesus Aguilar. He popped out to end the first inning off Robbie Ray. Okay. And it was my first time being around people. And people were high-fiving and hugging. Right. And I looked around the most unbelievable moment I'll ever experience in a baseball stadium after a couple years alone.
Wild, yeah.
And then that first game back in Toronto. How that ended, Santiago Espinal had that was a barehanded grab, I think, to end the game. Teoscar hit a big home run, but just amazing to look back on that and
everything about that was so weird, man. I remember watching that first game back in Toronto, and I can't remember what the actual number was. They were allowed 15,000 or 20, whatever it was, the first game back. And we're just going to put them all shoulder to shoulder right behind home plate. And you're like,
yeah,
I don't really understand what was accomplished here, but I'm just glad we're back across the border. And
man, what an experience. I just, God, the other one that's coming to mind right now, too, is that first Buffalo trip coming back. I had to quarantine coming back then, I remember as well, for 14 days.
Wow.
And which, I mean, good, fine. Like, it was a very bad time. People were dying. Yes. I had no problem.
Sure.
But I remember, I wrote this in the book too. I remember pacing out, and this is downtown Toronto, so I can reach out my hands and touch my bed and my fridge. It's a really great life. But I remember I counted out, it was 32 or 33 steps from the corner of my apartment all the way down the hallway to the door, and I would just pace it and watch a full baseball game and just try to move. And I remember during those 14 days, there were a couple of times where a border officer would actually come check on me in person.
Make sure you were there.
And and they, as you assume, had the worst energy possible. And it was like trying to catch me in a lie.
Yeah.
And I actually put this note in the book, but I just, at one point I had to budge my door open a bit. I was like, listen, dude, there's all the bourbon bottles. There's the bag of trash. I've not left this apartment. Here. All right, dude, it's miserable in here. Get out of here. But it's, those years were crazy. It's, I can't believe the things that were done to play baseball and make it work. And the cardboard cutouts, man, that's as weird as it
that was wild. Yeah.